I spent last week at RecFest in Nashville, which is a large talent acquisition conference, to learn what companies are planning to do, in particular with AI, in 2025 and beyond. And as no surprise, AI was the central focus of conversation among all the companies that were there, all the people that I spoke with, and all the keynote addresses that I attended. So it's very obvious that AI is not a flash in the pan. It's not going anywhere, and in fact, companies are doubling down on it. And I'm going to share with you in this video what I learned and what you can expect in the next coming years. So what is RecFest and why should you care? Well, RecFest is an annual conference that happens in both the UK and in Nashville, where talent acquisition professionals all get together and they discuss what's going on in the industry and what's the latest and greatest, the state of the art, and where things are moving. And this is directly from the source. I had a chance to sit down directly with several major ATS systems, ones that I've used before, ones you've certainly encountered in your job search, as well as a lot of these AI companies that are popping up to support them. And one of the first major takeaways is that an overwhelming majority of the AI technologies that are being implemented behind the scenes in talent acquisition mostly are about productivity enhancement. And so this is just making the recruiter's job easier behind the scenes. So what I mean here is that AI is helping with mundane or high volume tasks. Things like scheduling, sorting, writing job descriptions, creating interview guides for the interview teams, transcribing interviews, and doing a lot of the behind the scenes work that you don't necessarily see as a job seeker.
Machine learning ops engineer. What even is this? We had a similar position before. Where's that template? Salary, benefits. I don't have time for all this research. Wait, what?
Hi, how can I help you today?
Try creating a job description for me.
Here it is. All based on fitting past jobs with matching benefits and a salary range according to similar jobs in the area.
Now we're talking. Published. Maybe it's too early for candidates.
No worries. I have sourced 26 profiles of people I think are a good fit for the job and 4 past candidates that look promising on a past performance for a similar role.
That's perfect.
Good morning. 104 more people applied for the job. I have evaluated them and sorted them by best match.
Looks like we should reach out to them.
I have already crafted the emails. I'll ask them to book a free slot on your calendar.
That's amazing. I'll send them right away. Sounds like I can take a break.
I got an email from Alex Bob and he's interested. Should I arrange an interview?
Sure thing, go ahead. Don't forget to create a scorecard for me.
You think I wouldn't have already taken care of that?
You're a lifesaver. Do you have a name?
And I think the goal here is probably pretty obvious, and it's not unique to just recruiting. A lot of these companies are looking at leveraging AI tools to take away some of the mundane tasks so that in theory, their workforce can be more productive. Now, there's going to be a segment of people who's going to be worried about whether or not AI is going to take their jobs, and recruiting is no different. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of people that I spoke with tried to convince me, I don't know if I'm totally convinced yet, they tried to convince me that AI was not meant to replace positions. Rather, it was supposed to help employees be more productive. Now, in theory, it sounds great, but in practicality, some of the technologies that I was hearing, I'm thinking to myself, like, this could be kind of dangerous downstream. In fact, one AI company openly admitted on stage that their goal was to replace white-collar labor, whatever that's supposed to mean. And admittedly, I found myself agreeing with some of the stuff that was coming on these presentations, like, that particular piece of software actually does sound very beneficial. This scheduling piece of software definitely would take a lot of burden off me. And man, it would be nice to use this AI-driven summarizing tool to go in and take all the notes that I took from a candidate's interview and then be able to put them into a very concise format. You know, that stuff actually could be very beneficial, but that's all from a recruiter's perspective and making their lives easier. But there was a lot of technology that was going to be front-facing to the candidate. The first thing that I saw was technology designed to write job descriptions, which, again, probably is pretty nice for the hiring teams. But in addition to that, also creating job ads. And you might think that that's relatively mundane, that's not a big deal, but it actually impacts the job seeker. And the reason being is that there's some statistics that support This company that's doing this started using this AI bot to create job ads that they would help place onto different job boards and advertisements and that sort of thing. The interesting thing is that companies who actually use this inside of the Workday ATS ended up getting a 62% increase in candidates over the human-generated job ads. So what that means is that there's actually more competition, and that's probably not what you want to hear if you're an active job seeker. In addition to that, and much to the dismay of most job seekers, and frankly myself included, they do have a chatbot that screens candidates, and it used to not be a thing. In fact, I actually raised my hand when they were talking about this and asked the question of, is this chatbot making decisions? In other words, is the AI become self-aware and making employment decisions on behalf of the recruiter? And the answer that I got was, it just depends on the company. If they want it programmed that way, we can program it that way. But in a lot of cases, they tried to assure me that companies weren't necessarily doing that. But the functionality is there. And there are some companies, apparently, who do leverage AI, and probably going to see that become more prevalent in the future, especially when you're looking at an increased volume of applicants because of these job postings and other things that I'm just about to talk about. And when they're breaking down how the AI actually screens your resume, what they were saying is the first thing is that they do resume parsing. So they will take the AI bot and they'll parse your resume, obviously looking for certain keywords or clusters of keywords. And they'll put people into ranking buckets. And so that was the major thing that they were trying to demonstrate, is they're not necessarily making the decision for you in most cases, but rather they're ranking the candidates by saying this candidate has these skill sets. So in other words, this chatbot can sit running behind the scenes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, scanning these resumes as they come in, ranking them in order, and then presenting the recruiter the top 10, 20, or 30 people. Now, it doesn't mean that the rest of the candidates are going to get dismissed or rejected, but they're probably not going to show up as high potential candidates. So while this automated system is running behind the scenes, it's ranking these people in order, and then it's sending automated emails to them to schedule them for interviews. And so the recruiter basically doesn't have to do all the sourcing work. And what they tried to reassure me is that even though the recruiter may not be looking at the resumes directly, it's better for the job seeker because you actually get seen. So in this hypothetical case, they could scan through 1,000 applications, looking at every single applicant and then grabbing the top 5% or 10% and moving them to the top of the bucket. Whereas the human recruiter screening them may not be able to look through all of those resumes, and it might be able to read your resume even deeper than a recruiter might. But again, it might be only that 5-second glance, but if it's an AI bot doing it, they're trying to assure me that you have a better chance of getting seen. But here's what makes it even more complex for the job seeker, because when an applicant applies for a job, they're considered to be an inbound applicant because they're expressing interest for a specific position and the company hasn't pre-vetted them. So in other words, you could get people who have no skill at all who are applying for these positions, and out of that 1,000, there might only be 100 that even meet the requirements and maybe only 10 that are a close fit. There might not be any. So the recruiter will often go off and do their own sourcing. In other words, they'll head over to places like LinkedIn or GitHub or other places, and they'll try to find candidates who are very closely aligned to what the hiring manager is expecting. But here's the rub. As far as AI is concerned, there's actually a bot that is going to start doing that for them. So this bot will actively go off and start scanning all of these different repositories of candidates, places like LinkedIn, etc., looking for candidates who meet the requirements of the position. And they're pulling these candidates into the interview process by sending them automated emails through an AI system. So that means that not only are you competing with more people who are coming in through job ads that generate more candidate flow and more candidates just applying to the position, but now you've got to deal with all of the passive candidates that are sourced by the AI bots. In fact, Workday statistics showed that they sourced 1.7 million candidates in the second quarter of this year alone. So the volume is pretty staggering, and I venture to say they're going to be able to outsource a recruiter because, again, that bot is going to be running 24 hours a day, every single day of the year, and recruiters simply can't do that. Of course, this is all great for the companies who get all these candidates who are much more aligned, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier for the person who's looking for a job. So what can we expect in the next few years? Because it's obvious to me that the way we interact with companies and the way we get hired is going to pretty drastically change. The major takeaway is that recruiting is going to become much less personal and much more automated. So there's going to be a lot more interaction with AI bots that will get increasingly sophisticated. And in some cases, you may not even know that you're talking to an AI bot. Some of the technology that I saw was pretty convincing. So it's going to be a little less personal. You're probably not going to get an actual human recruiter on the phone, so to speak, until deeper into the interview process. And you'll probably be dealing with chatbots as you apply for these roles, which could be actually pretty handy because you can get some basic questions answered by using the chatbots of these companies. You might even be able to check the status on your applications and things like that. And it will probably do a much better job of closing out applicants who aren't considered for the role. So in theory, we should see less ghosting happening. And also expect to see that calendar invite coming over for the interview is going to be in the form of a chatbot who will automatically schedule you. The nice thing is that you can usually get interviews scheduled much quicker and much more seamless. And if you need to make any changes, you can just send the chatbot a note and it will automatically do it for you. So the good news that I've taken away from this is that it actually may be more likely for you to get seen and considered for these positions. In fact, it's going to be much more likely for your application to actually be reviewed, whether it's by a human or more likely by a bot. But nonetheless, you actually will get seen. And I think all the back and forth of companies working with recruiters, working with coordinators and all this stuff is going to become much more seamless as well. So hopefully we can get those interviews scheduled in a more timely manner. And hopefully you're going to be able to check on the status of your applications and they'll be more up to date. And there'll be less ghosting as a result of AI taking on a lot more of those mundane tasks, especially when you close out a job rec after a position's been filled. In theory, the ATS system should already be able to do that, but maybe there'll be a chatbot that'll be in there reminding the recruiter or saying, would you like me to do this on your behalf? But with the good comes the bad, because unfortunately there are some negative things about this as well for the candidate. Namely, the biggest thing is going to be the increased competition. You're going to be dealing with potentially a lot more candidates because the AI can go off and find these candidates, can source them. They're going to be generating more candidate flow. So the competition is going to be that much more fierce. In addition to that, they're also going to be screening you. So while you might get your application seen, it's going to become very cut and dry and you either have the skill or you don't. In other words, there's not going to be a whole lot of room for interpretation. The nice thing about working with a recruiter, and I know everybody likes to throw recruiters under the bus, but the recruiter actually advocates on your behalf more than you realize because the recruiter needs you to get the job so that they can get it filled on their metrics. And oftentimes we're going to be going behind the scenes to the hiring manager and convincing them, hey, the reason why this person doesn't have it clearly reflected on their resume, the skill that you're looking for, they actually have it somewhere else. And let me tell you a little bit about their story. An AI bot's simply not going to be able to do that. It's either cut and dry, you either have it or you don't, and it's just on to the next one. It's the impersonal nature of AI, and simply you can't replace that human element, and the interpretation is going to be something that's cut and dry here. Now, on the flip side, you also have less bias. That chatbot probably isn't going to know that the company that you work for, the hiring manager doesn't really like. So they won't eliminate you because they've already made a judgment on you because you work there, or that you're from this part of the country and they want somebody from that part of the country and they tell the story for you. The chatbot doesn't care. They may not even care about the job gap that you have on your resume. Now, when you actually get into the interview process itself, you're still going to have to meet with humans and explain some of this stuff. But nonetheless, there's going to be less interpretation and hopefully less bias. So I guess that's a good thing as well. And it eliminates the cases where maybe the hiring manager said, well, the candidate said something in the interview that was very off-putting, and we can go back and reference it and say, actually, that's not how it came across to us. So there is a use case for that as well. Moral of the story is AI is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's only going to become more prevalent in the hiring process. So if we want to reclaim control in our careers, we have to pivot with the rest of the market. And that's what I'll be talking about on the rest of this channel. If you're somebody that's freaking out about this, just take a deep breath. All of the techniques that we were doing anyway are still going to be very valid. In fact, they're probably going to be even more valid going forward. So we're just going to implement our own best practices that I talk about on this channel all the time, and we'll be just fine. And if you feel like you need more help with your job search, check out my website, alifeafterlayoff.com. It's loaded with tips and tricks. And I also have some of my deepest and most intimate recruiting knowledge in the form of some training courses, and you can check those out there as well. Anyway, I'm going to be bringing out a couple more videos about what you can do specifically as a job seeker to get in front of this AI revolution so that you can still be considered the best possible candidate. All the same stuff applies here, guys. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.